Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me in this Breakthrough Leadership video series. This video series is called B2B, From Brokenness to Breakthrough. I'm Matt DeYoung, and I want to welcome you. If you're watching this video right now and you're a Christian business leader, and you're battling for breakthrough in areas like your personal leadership, your organization, your team, or even just trying to achieve your vision, I want to assure you that you're in the right place. Because our goal is to help you unlock your purpose, live with passion, and become the leader that you are created to be. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking with Greg Yates about his story and also about his book called Broken, How Being Broken Unlocked the Greatest Success of My Life. I know his story can impact your leadership and can change your perspective about life. So Greg, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
You know, people may be watching this video and they know a little bit about you, but there might be people that don't know much about you. So I want to just talk a little bit about why are you qualified to talk about leadership and to talk about breakthrough. So I know that you've been an entrepreneur since going back to being in school and really your entire life. And you've owned, over the last 30 years, 20 businesses and 14 at one time, and have generated annual sales in the mid 8 figures much of that time. I know you've provided jobs for people, hundreds of focused teams, working with Fortune 500 customers, and you've won awards for a lot of these types of achievements in business circles and serving on boards of charitable foundations, hospitals, and universities. You've also been very generous and having a deep crusade for people in need. You've always given money, raised money, been a part of charitable causes, and you've been a speaker, in fact, at many countless leadership groups and built strategies for many businesses. I know you have some great hobbies that include flying. You've been an instrument-rated pilot for more than 30 years, and even a professional vocalist for part of your life. You know, but the thing is, Greg, I mention all that, and I don't say it to brag on you. I know you wouldn't want me to do that. But I just mentioned it to say that you have a unique set of qualifications beyond just being successful and being profitable, but that leadership experience, the business experiences, even your faith have given you unique qualifications to speak to Christian business leaders. Most importantly, Greg, I know God began an extraordinary change in you starting back in July of 2011. And that's why we're here today, isn't it?
That's right. You know, in July 2011, and of course you can read about it in every painful detail in my book, but in July 2011, it was as if in my mind, every one of the things you just talked about was erased. Yeah. None of that existed anymore. I was at rock bottom. I was beginning, even though I had a lot of perspective about business, about life, about my own skills, my own skill sets, everything that I had built on foundationally vanished. And in those moments, I began to ask the questions that I had been unwilling to ask for the previous 30 years.
Yeah. So the book is called Broken. And you know, my first question to you is, with all of the successes that you've had, and you could come and talk today on this video about success and about leadership, why are you choosing to sort of lead with a book called Broken and talk about brokenness?
Well, that's a great question, Matt. And I think the reason, I've asked myself that, it was the only thing that would obsess me anymore about life. And I've lived a life of obsession. I've lived a life of pursuit. And when I came face to face with brokenness, literally every definition of my own life being destroyed. When I came face to face with that, I realized that the one thing I had not defined for myself about success, because that's what we're talking about here is success. The one thing I'd not defined was satisfaction. You see, because I had continued to think through my life that making money, developing what societally we would call power, and having influence, that those things would eventually result in satisfaction and the peace and contentment that I really wanted. And not until I was broken was I able to find those things.
Right. So a lot of it's about far out what I'm trying to achieve, what I'm working towards, but it never kind of showed up. And so this thing happened that you mentioned in the book. Why write this book? I mean, is the book your comeback story?
Well, I'm not certain I would call it that, but my reality for the book is this. I had to tell myself what had happened to me.
Right.
You know, I was tempted to put my head down and just imagine that my life was pretty much over. When the event occurred in July 2011, which I tell in great detail, when that occurred, from my perspective, everything about my life was done. I had nothing left. My name was destroyed. I felt like all the premises just vanished. And so I thought, well, you know, I had my shot, right? I had my shot. I blew it. And I wanted to just put my head down. And the idea of writing this book really was born from the standpoint of, I need to understand what happened to me. And of course, it wasn't just about the brokenness by the time I wrote the book. It was about the restoration. It was about this idea that I could not redeem myself. That is such an iconic phrase in my mind. I had no ability to redeem myself, and yet suddenly, in the middle of this chaos, in the middle of laying in a bunk, a top bunk, in a 10-foot by 10-foot prison cell, that I had peace. And I'd never experienced it like that before. And so I had to write about it because I needed to understand. And in the process, of course, in writing and struggling over these things, it was almost like I was pursuing any other opportunity that I ever had, any other concept, any other technology that I'd ever had. I had to understand it. I had to dig in and not just be. I had to know. I want to stay here. I don't want to say too much here, Matt, but you know, I was afraid. And I've never known fear. I was afraid that I would blow it again. And the only way I knew to understand how to reframe my life was to understand what had happened to me. And so that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. So some people know your story, maybe if they've been friends with you or they've had the privilege of being part of the book writing process. But many people who are watching this video now might not know that in July of 2011, up till that point, massive success financially in terms of influence, all the things that one would want as a businessman and as a leader. But in July of 2011, you mentioned in the book that something very dramatic happened, totally unexpected, and it wound up creating a paradigm shift. What was that for people who don't know?
Yeah, talk about disbelief. I mean, have you ever been in the middle of something and you're just, you can't really imagine in your own mind that it's actually happening? I mean,
surreal.
Yeah, surreal, completely surreal. In July of 2011, I was in my office with a great full glass wall view of the parking lot when a dozen or more police cars came zooming into the place, and armed men with their guns drawn came blasting into our facility, and we were being raided. We were being raided, looking for every document they could look for on our business. And
but it was so surprising. You literally thought it was for someone else.
I
maybe
thought
an
it was.
employee. Yeah.
I thought it was because somebody had done something really bad, and they were looking for them, and I had no idea what they would even be there for. And of course, I can't go into all those details right now, but I'm very detailed in a humbling and I think precise way about it in my book.
Yeah, that's great. But when you tell this story, now it is, of course, looking back. And I remember one of those moments of looking back as we had a conversation, and I just instinctively asked, I don't know if it was offensive or not, but I asked, now that you're back from prison, from this whole fiasco, aren't you ready to just move on? And you gave me an answer that I thought was really interesting, and you said it without hesitation. Do you remember what that was?
I do. I can, you know how certain moments just anchor themselves in your mind. I remember where I was. I remember the conversation, and your question was, are you ready to get this behind you?
Yeah.
And my gut level answer, I hadn't prepared, was no, I don't think so. I don't think I ever want to get this behind me. I don't ever want to forget the impact this has had on my life. And of course, that was the beginning of some amazing conversations that you and I have had,
Right.
asking some of those questions that I didn't even know how to ask.
Yeah. So you had to tell the story. You felt compelled to do that. You wrote it out. When I asked you, are you ready to get this behind you? Without hesitation, you said, no, I don't want to get this behind. I want to learn from it. But to share this story, it creates a tremendous amount of vulnerability and possibly even risk for yourself and for your family. Why do this? I mean, why put yourself and expose yourself in this way?
Yeah. Well, Matt, 100 answers I could give. And yet the reality for all of this is that being honest with myself and moving from this broken feeling that I had in every environment.
Right.
I mean, you have to understand, when I got home from prison, we haven't even talked about prison yet. When I got home from prison, the reality was I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to the grocery store. I got in and out as fast as I could. I was under major pressure just to even be in public.
Right.
And the idea, as you said, of vulnerability, of even sharing this story, it wasn't my idea. I didn't really want to. I didn't really want to do it. But I really feel like I have no choice but to do it, because I don't want anybody else to go blindly into brokenness when they do have alternatives through personal awareness that that's where they are.
And you feel especially a conviction or just a compelled nature towards men, towards Christian business leader, to learn from them.
Very, very, very much so. I feel like I have some insights into the ego and the attitudes of in particular Christian businessmen, who aren't certain how to fit their faith into business. And so as a result of that, it becomes a camouflaging, it becomes a living up to expectations, which really creates brokenness in us. One of the stories in my book, is start out the book with a very clear representation of how I felt to be in a worship service.
Right.
And the attitude I had toward not only what was going on, but the combat that was occurring in my own heart, in my own thoughts, the endless combat. And, I've let a lot of businessmen read that chapter before I ever even published the book, let businessmen read that chapter, and many of them said, oh, I know exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So when you say I feel compelled towards leaders to share my story, one of the common denominators with every leader is to be successful. How has your definition of success changed, say, before 2011 and then now after?
Yeah, great question. My definition of success was the pursuit. I mean, I had definitions for myself that I thought were real. And in many ways, they are real. I was wired in such a way that, when I pursue something, I become obsessive about it. I want knowledge, I want information. But the problem was my definition of success had never been something I had developed. I never developed it. I looked around, I saw what other people said, oh, this guy's really successful. And so I patterned after that. I patterned after the idea that making money, having a lot of influence and power meant I was successful. And in fact, over the years, many people, would say to me, you're so successful. And I was arguing with them in my own mind the whole time. Right. Because I felt I'd not yet achieved success. Why was that? Because I had no clear definition of success. I had no definition at all of success other than money. Right. It's a pretty poor definition. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think businesses should be profitable. And businessmen, Christian businessmen, have the favor of God toward the profitability of their businesses. I really believe that. But satisfaction, contentment, and peace had never really found their way on any permanent basis into my life. Now you ask me, what's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference?
The difference is that when I finally achieved peace, I say achieved as if somehow, it was by my own efforts, when I finally found it, or it found me, I had to look around and say, there's no reason. There's no reason for why I feel the way I feel. There's no reason for this deep sense of satisfaction based in my own performance. So therefore, my definition of success had to change.
Right.
And that definition became a definition surrounded by success, satisfaction, and to be honest with everyone who's watching, and to find its truth in faith. And many of the things I'm capable to do are exactly the same. But the thing I'm seeking is completely different.
Perfect.